The following presentation was recorded live for the International Association of Square Dance Callers' 33rd Annual Convention. We take you live to the Renaissance Suites Hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, where our session is just getting underway.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Arden Hopkin. I'm the voice specialist here at CALLERLAB. They call me an expert. You all know that definition, don't you? Say what? Well, no, the definition of an expert that I use is that if you take the etymology, that word in X is a has-been. Is a drip under pressure, and that's where I qualify. I hope as you've come in, you've picked up two pieces of paper. One of them will look like this. It gives the instructions that are associated with this session. The other one is a half sheet of paper that is something that I hope that you'll keep with yourselves over the next couple of conventions, because as we go along here, that'll be your certification. When you have accumulated those 3 levels, then you'll present that to the CALLERLAB, and you'll get a certificate of achievement, a certificate of graduation, that you've at least been participants in this seminar. There is a concept behind this progressive voice seminar, which is that you learn in a kind of a spiraling way. In the basic, we cover a number of basic skills, and then there are some exercises or some tasks that you can do for a period of time. And after you've done those tasks for that period of time, till the next convention, then when you come to the intermediate level, there will be an assumption that those skills are already kind of in place, and you can go on to a second level skill. There isn't any certification, no testing or anything like that. It's just for your own benefit. But someone earlier, just before we started, inquired whether it would be a good idea to just take these in sequences and go straight on through. You're certainly welcome to attend if you want to, but the idea is that you participate in this thing over the course of several years. There will now, from here on out, be sessions in basic, sessions in intermediate, and session in advanced, so that if for some reason you don't attend conventions sequentially, it doesn't really matter. You can come forward and take care of that. But I won't be signing off on folks that come straight through this time just because of that developmental portion. Are there any questions there? If not, you'll notice that I see some familiar faces, and that means that either you didn't get it the first time around, or one fellow said, I keep changing it, and so the basic keeps changing. It's not as basic as it was, and I can't help that. I just keep learning new things and want to share them with y'all. I am not a square dance caller, but I feel almost like I am one, because I've been around y'all for this long a period of time, and I admire what you're doing, and I appreciate it, and I actually appreciate the opportunity to contribute a little bit to the things that you do. It's quite an amazing thing that you do, I believe. And I've always maintained that if a person can make it to age 25 and still be talking, then they're probably doing mostly what they're supposed to do with their voices. And if they can square dance call and get somebody to pay them for doing that, they're probably doing all right by themselves. But on any given level, there's something always that you can do a little bit better. And I guess that's what you're all here for, is to try to get a little better at what you do. But you all need to start from the assumption that you're doing things more right than wrong. You're more successful than unsuccessful. And so this isn't a question where you come in here and have to act like you don't know anything. You do. It's just to take what you've got and make it a little bit better. The whole issue of voice is a fairly mysterious thing to most folks. It's one of the things that we do right from the very moment that we're born. As soon as they slap us on the butt, we start using our voices. And yet, when we try to understand what we're doing, it's very complicated. And the reason that it's very complicated has to do with the way that our patterns in life are set. If our mind had to think about everything that it had to do, it would exhaust itself. And so in order to save brain power, we develop habits. where we don't have to think about things as consciously as we do when the first times that we do them. You ladies that are here, do you all remember what it felt like the first time you wore high heels? As one of the most awkward moments in a young girl's life. Or for anybody else who's learned how to drive stick-shift car, and you know you're 15 and a half and you're really determined that you're going to be grown up, and they put you behind the stick shift and you kill the engine and you jackrabbit around the parking lot and you feel like an absolute idiot. And that's a skill that you have not developed. But you've got a high degree of motivation, and so you practice it. And pretty soon you figure it out. And then, 6 months or 8 months later, your mother asks you to run to the store 10 blocks away. And if she were to ask you upon your return, how many times did the shift gears, you wouldn't be able to answer her. It's just become something that's second nature. So our mind develops neural pathways where we have a thought, and instead of actually thinking about it, it just goes immediately to the command center, and those habits are called forth. And so we do things very subconsciously and very naturally. And it's a way to save ourselves labor and time. Unfortunately, some of those neural pathways that we've established aren't as efficient as they would have otherwise have been. And so in that sense, it takes an enormous amount of effort to change those neural pathways, catch the thought right at the moment that it comes in your brain, and reroute it in a different direction. And there's nothing more fundamental than using your voice. And so if you've been using your voice all your life a certain way, and I come along and offer you suggestions on how to change it and how to improve upon it, then you're going to be conflicted between that which you've been doing all your life and that which... And it requires you, each one of you, to catch the impulse right at the moment that it happens and reroute it into another direction. Well, that's really a drag. It takes a lot of brain power to do that. That's the reason you made the habit in the first place, so that you didn't have to think about it. And now here I am asking you to think about it. And that's one of the reasons why my desire is to have this be a kind of a progressive seminar, so that we go around some basics. It's not going to make that many demands on you. But then after you've worked on that for a while and those things start to move from being very self-conscious to being sort of comfortable but still a little weird, to the point where it says, oh, this is pretty normal. As a matter of fact, I like this better than the old. And pretty soon it slips back into the subconscious and the new habit is created and you're able to move on. But during that period of time, you're like with 3 feet and 6 thumbs. You just can't do anything naturally when it comes to do with those skills, because you've got to be thinking about them along the way. Well, you get that on the basic level. Then you come back around, and then there's another layer that goes a little bit more advanced than that, that presupposes that you've already got the skills on the basic level. And you come on up and you get those, and all of a sudden you got that headache all over again as you try to adjust for new things. And then you come back again on a third level. So welcome to 3 years of headaches. The reality is it isn't that bad, because I try to present the things in such a way as to make it very easy to understand. The interesting thing about our habits is because we are prescripted to behave the way we behave, we can start off saying determinedly, I'm going to go in this new path, and we keep going down this new path, and our habits start to act like a big magnet, and they draw us back to the old path. And we say, I'm on this new path, and I can't figure out how come I'm getting the same problems I had on the old path. Well, guess what? You've slipped back over onto the old path and just called it a new thing. And so it's a really important thing as you're going to change this to, on a regular basis, do the old and do the new, and lay them right side by side so that you can see what this is and what that is, and perpetually choose to do that instead of this. And along the way, you do, I tell my students at the university, first day that you're working on this, for every time you do it the new way, you do it the old way. So you can lay them side by side. And then tomorrow, you do it 2 times the new way and 1 time the old way. And the next day, 3 times the new way and 1 time the old way. To just continue to remind yourself, this is this and that is that. And as you do that over a period of time, you can see what the math will do. Pretty soon it's 100 times the new way and 1 time the old way. And then you quit counting, and you just every once in a while go back and do the old way. And if you find the old way and the new way being the same way, then you need to go back and re-identify where you're trying to go, because the habits are very powerful. And many times in the university, my students will, after about the first 4 months of study, they'll say, singing isn't any fun anymore. It used to be so natural and so easy, and now I think about it so much that I've lost the joy of singing. And I agree with them, that their brains are so busy that they can't really concentrate on the fun part. It isn't natural anymore. But then along about the time they start complaining, then they start getting mastery of it, and it moves from first becoming aware and then gaining a degree of competency with what they're trying to do. And then they go from competency toward consistency. And then once they get to consistency, they go to habituation. And it's from consistency to habituation that it starts to turn fun again. But while you're learning from toward competency to consistency, that's where the headaches occur. So fair warning to all of you, there is a price to pay. It doesn't come out of your wallet, but it does come. And it's worth the price to pay. Believe me, it really is worth the price to pay. So with that kind of an introduction, let's get started. You'll see on the sheet, the things that we're going to be looking about today are singer's posture, how to make a healthy voice sound, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, I can't remember. Oh yeah, then how to make a healthy sound, how to manage that sound with your breath, and then how to tune the resonances just a little bit. And these are all going to be things that you've been doing the way that you've been doing them all of your life. And so there'll be some things that'll feel pretty normal, and there'll be some things that'll strike you as being new or peculiar. So here we go. First thing we're going to talk about is posture. May I have a volunteer? Actually, I need 2 volunteers, one who's a woman and one who's a man. Anybody want to jump forward? I got a man coming from the back or here in the front. I don't care. Come on up. If I got a woman who's going to be a volunteer, come on up. Thank you very much. Okay, for the tape's sake.
Greg Anderson, Colorado.
And?
Jean Lee Coco.
Okay, so Greg and Jean, here we go. The first thing that we're going to talk about is posture. In order for your body to be, yeah, I used to have a little toy. You stick it up, hit the little button, it collapses down. The first thing that you want to try to do is to find a singer's posture. A singer's posture is aligned with your head balanced over your shoulders over your hips over your knees, and your knees over your ankles. That old Sunday school song, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, it kind of fits here. But it has a little bit more particular quality to it. The first thing that you want to try to do is to find a way to balance yourself gravitationally. So I'm going to ask both of you to close your eyes. You all are going to get to try this out in the audience just a minute, but I'm going to let them be the examples. First, I want you to close your eyes. Then I want you to rock forward onto your toes and back onto your heels, and keep doing that back and forth until you find what feels like gravitational center, so that you're balanced front and back to yourself. Then you have to use your imaginations here just a little bit. Can you imagine where your ears are, Greg? You can sense your ears. Jean, you can sense your ears? All right, can you sense where your shoulder points are? Those are these things right at your shoulder, top of your shoulders. Can you put your ears aligned gravitationally right over your shoulders? Just use your internal kinesthetic sense to see if you can do it. Okay, the next thing I want you to do is to find those shoulder points and find your hip points. And line them up, one right over the other. And then the other one is your ankle. Go. We look over here at Jean. She's got her ears hidden, but she looks like she's in pretty good shape. That puts her chest at a higher position. And the older you get, the more that's valuable, right? Okay, get your sternum up where it should be, and that's a nice position to be in. Jean's in pretty good shape, except that she's looking heavenward all the while. Are you doing that for some good reason?
No. No good reason.
I think everybody should look heavenward all the while. Yeah. But everybody has a little bump on the back of their skull right at the base. Gene, will you take a finger and put yourself right there? Put your little finger right there. And then put your thumb down. Everybody has the top vertebrae at the top of your spine. And just take those two. You can feel them. Stretch them comfortably far apart. Not exaggeratedly, but comfortably. Okay? I'm going to come over here to Greg. Here's the point, and there's the point. Now stretch those 2 points as far apart as you can comfortably. Keep stretching. Okay, so make it uncomfortably far apart. Oh, there are some muscles that most of us have right here at the base of our skull. They're postural muscles that get tight on most of us. And those tight muscles have to do with poor posture, but they can also have a really negative effect upon your singing. So now that's a little bit better. The problem with Greg now is that he spends the rest of his life humbly looking at the floor. That's not so bad, too. Looking at toward heaven or looking at the floor. I don't know. I vote for heaven. But so now what I'm putting my hand behind Greg's head, and I'm going to ask him to push back against my hand without shortening those muscles. Leave that space between those two places as far apart as you can and push back against my hand. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Now, what he's having to do to push back is to not use his neck muscles. He's using some other muscles in his torso, aren't you? Keep coming. Keep coming. He's going to say, if I take my hands away, he's going to fall over backwards. Now he really will fall over backwards. He will. I'm going to get you to right about there. I'm going to let go. And he's going to say, I can't believe you tell me that straight up and tall. And, yeah, it says, this is, I want you to meet Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein right over here. So the idea, turn around backwards if you would, Greg, his better side. Now, from here all the way down to his tailbone, I want you to sense a stretch. Stretch long, 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 long. And then there's another stretch, the right between your shoulder blades, and stretch that long and long and long. Stretch it long. And along the way, what happens is that if you'll turn sideways with Greg now, you'll notice that Greg's shoulders and his shoulder blades are drawn in a militaristic fashion toward the back of his body. But the reality is that your shoulder points should be exactly midway between the front of your body and back. Another really interesting thing is that we think of our skull attaching to our spine, attaching to our skull right here at the back. But the truth is, it's right dead center gravitationally in the center of our skull is where our neck attaches. And so you see those little bobble-headed dolls that you see riding in the back of people's cars? You want to kind of get to where you're be able to bobble-head your own neck. And that means that all of the muscles that have been held rigidly for all of these many years have to let go. Okay, now, I'm going to ask you, this feels real stiff, doesn't it, Greg? I want you to walk around a circle. Gene, you do the same. And it'll take them about 4 or 5 times around the room here. And pretty soon, it'll start to not feel so strange. Is that starting to feel at all normal, Gene, or are you still feeling pretty stiff? Yeah. It has to become something natural. Now, that's one way to do it. Don't sit down yet because I'm not done with you. But I want all of the rest of you to stand up and try that for yourselves. And then we're going to take a field trip. No, I'm kidding. But what I'd like to have you do is get used to this position. The first thing that you want to do is roll forward on the balls of your feet and roll back on your heels. Forward, back, until you can find the center of your body gravitationally. The next thing I want you to do is close your eyes, and I want you to sense the balance where your head is in relationship to the rest of your body. Find where your ears are. Line them up over your shoulder points. Line the shoulder points up over your hips and on down towards your knees and down to your ankle. And for most of you, that will feel a little unusual. Most people, when they get to this position, find themselves feeling about 1 inch or 2 taller than they normally do. And when they get their head in the right position, where their neck is long at the back and stretched loose and easy, they feel like they're kind of stuck up, that they're looking down their nose at people. Because many of us kind of collapse our posture and let it fall. Now open your eyes How many of you feel really comfortable and normal right now? Before we go out today, I'm going to ask you to get back in this posture, and then I'm going to ask you to walk to lunch looking like this, and then we'll have the, Stepford class. Okay, go ahead and have a seat now. Now, that's not the two of you yet. That's one way you can do that. Gene, I want you to find that wall over there, and you find the wall over here. Another way you can do this is to put your heels against the back. If you don't have too big of a fanny, put your fanny against, then your shoulders, and then here comes the hard part. Put the back of your head against the wall. You'll notice that there's quite a big tunnel here for Greg, and if I can stretch him long now, stretch back in, and then that stretches here at your neck a lot, but it stretches somewhere else too, doesn't it? Yep. Do you feel any activity right in through here, the muscles? Maybe not. Okay. All right. Now, that's right. And she's got this, she's got the waistcoat. Come on over here. There's another way to go about this that I'm going to ask all of you to try here in just a second. But these are tools that you can use that don't require any special equipment. You just got to get a wall someplace that doesn't have a wainscot on it. Okay, now step away from the wall. Whoops! You notice how Jean changed her posture the minute she stepped away from the wall. Go back to it. Okay, now come away from the wall. Good. Stiff. It's stiff right now. So what I was talking about, it's unusual. Okay. And now, based upon how that feels right now, is this something that you're just dying to learn how to do? This is this and that's that, and I don't want that. I want this. So somehow or another, this has got to get to the point where it feels a little bit more useful than what it currently feels. And there's no question about it. That which starts off feeling awkward will eventually get to where it feels more natural. If there's a price to be paid for this change, there's got to be a benefit to work it. And let me tell you what the benefits are. Greg's right here in front. There are some muscles that attach from behind the ears and come down, and they attach to the larynx. When a person is in a collapsed position, with your neck craned and forward, then those muscles are lax, and the larynx tips forward on the windpipe. It puts a little bit of a crimp, and it doesn't make the whole system as efficient. You return to that good tall posture, and now all of a sudden he's got his larynx in a position where as the wind passes through it, it will vibrate automatically, and it will happen in a very natural way. So right here at the top of Gary's body is going to be very well benefited. The second thing that happens is that one of the heavy parts of our body is our head. And it's like this great big heavy melon. And when it stands, usually it's forward by an inch or 2 inches on the axis. Then the muscles of the shoulder and the neck have to become extremely strong in order to hold it out of position. And as they get strong, then there are other some compensations that are made that leave the posture kind of irregular. That has an effect upon the whole breathing posture. We're going to get there in just a second, but remind me to come back and explain why breathing is so much better when you're in an erect position than when you're not. Some of you know that one of the hardest things about singing is running out of breath and not knowing how to manage your breath. And so if you can get your posture right, you'll just simplify that whole process when we get there. Okay, you ready to be guinea pigs, or if you had enough? Good, because I've got... Okay, you guys say have a seat, because I've got another way to try this. I need another man and another woman. Here's a man. Okay, Eric, how are you? And a woman going to volunteer. Thank you very much. This is Eric and Cindy. Now that system that I use, that's the system that I've been using for the last couple of years since I've been doing it, what you just heard me do. Now here's a new way to do it. Your body is actually made up of a whole bunch of concentric circles. They're not really circles. They're more like ovals, but they still exist in your body. One of them is the oval of your pelvis. The pelvic bone creates kind of a circular oval-like position right at the bottom of your torso. That's one place that you got a circle. You got another circle right at the bottom of your ribs. The rib cage creates a kind of a circle or an oval. And next place that you make a circle is kind of with the, it's not really a circle, but we're going to call it that anyway. It's kind of this rounding of the shoulders right here with the shoulder blades and the clavicles and the yeah, that's right. And the collarbone, yeah, the clavicles and the scapula make an oval right here. And then obviously the base of your skull, the occipital bone, creates an oval. What I want you to do, Eric, is can you imagine the bottom of your skull, that roundness here? And here's a roundness. Can you set that circle on top of that circle? Can you set this circle on top of that circle at your ribs? Yeah, you have to get in touch with your body to do this. And now what he's got a challenge with is that this circle and this circle don't match up right. The circle at the bottom of your ribs is forward of this one. That's weird, isn't it? But now remember, you got to keep this one and this one lined up too. We're only just getting started here. Okay, are you doing this along the same time, Gene? You got this circle right here, right? Yeah. And then you got this circle right here. Those are lined up pretty good. And lo and behold, when you do that, your ears sit in the right place pretty naturally. Now, your rib, the circle at the bottom of your ribs, lined up over the circle here. And most folks have the girdle or the yoke of their shoulders back of the rib cage. And you've got to get a way to line those things up. There's going to be a reason why, and this is where I'm going to come back to breathing. Okay, now you got this oval of your hips. Can you take the bottom of this? Can you take the circle of your rib cage and line it up over the oval of your pelvis? It's actually, in order to do that, your hips have to kind of roll forward a little bit because you got the one angle of your rib cage kind of sitting like this, and your hips sitting like that. The one sort of in an elevation to the rising side, and the other one the depressing side. You'd line those up, and in order to do that, you got to let go of some stiffness in the lower part of your back. Anybody have any trouble with lower back pain? Yeah, this is a way that you can solve that problem very readily. Now, how does that feel, Gene? Sorry. Cindy,
like I might fall backwards?
Does she look like she's going to fall over backwards? No, but it's unusual for, you're usually more aggressive than that, aren't you? Really kind of on the go. That's right. How about yourself, Eric?
Yeah, it feels like I'm pushing my pelvis forward.
Yeah, in a way you are, except the right way to do that is that stretch. Rather than consciously rotating your pelvis, just take that circle, take those set of circles and line them up across each other. You'll walk around like a duck for a few days, but it won't stay that way long. It won't stay that way long, and you'll start to feel the benefit right off the bat. Now, here we go. Well, in a certain way, it does strain your knees and it's a good strain, because when we throw our balance off, we'll often find ourselves in a kind of a hips thrust forward place, and our knees will lock at the back. And that doesn't do so well for your circulation. But when you line up these several circles, like I described to you, it's impossible to stand up erect and also not lock your knees. And so you'll find your knees slightly flexed. And all of a sudden, the muscles that control the kneecap are complaining a little bit because they're flexed more than they're used to being flexed. Isn't that kind of what you're feeling there, Cindy? Yeah. And she's only been at it a few moments. Yeah. That's right. And all of a sudden, things feel a little bit differently. Now, I'm going to come back over here to Eric for a second. The first thing I want you to do, Eric, is I want you to just go to your normal posture. Okay? It's not that very much different than where he was, but it's a little bit different. Now, what I want you to do is to imagine that you've got this little martini straw. And I want you to take a big, deep breath. Boy, that's an awfully big martini straw. You imagine how drunk he could get in a big hurry. It's really small. In other words, I want you to make a real big obstruction while you're trying to inhale. So it's... Where do you feel the muscle activities as you start to inhale? Particularly right down through here. You'll put your hand right... Yeah, he said, where do you want me to feel it now? He said, feel right there. Now do that intensive inhalation again. You can feel the muscles right here at the bottom of your ribs working really hard. That's actually where your diaphragm's located, and that's how you find your diaphragm. We're going to do that all here in just a second. Okay, so mostly what he feels is that the front part of his body expands a little bit when he does that. Now, I want you to find that posture again that you just found. Circle on circle on circle on circle. That's impressive. See, he's got there real quick. Now what I want you to do is that same thing, sucking through the martini straw. And now, instead of it feeling energized here in the front, you're starting to feel it energized all the way around your body, are you not? And that's what happens when the other advantage of having good posture. The diaphragm sort of divides the whole torso right at the base of the ribs. When you stand in a somewhat sway back position, the action of your diaphragm is down and forward, and it gives you a lot of thrust out here. But when you line your posture up right, you'll feel that your breath comes in a very big column. It's right underneath you. It's ready to make your voice work in a new way. Can you sense that, Cindy, as you tried that? Yeah, now that's the second positive reason. The first positive reason is to line up your larynx so that it'll be easy to make the sound. But the second reason for this posture is to align your breathing so that it's really ready to go. So this is a singer's posture. Interestingly, it's not as militaristic as you might have thought it was. It isn't shoulders thrown back and chest thrust forward, because that actually throws the whole breathing mechanism out of alignment. It's rather shoulders at a relaxed position, head lined up, stretch in the lower part of the back, flex in the knees, and then you don't feel as big and grand and pompous, but you're a whole lot more functional. So, thank you, too. Would all of you stand up and give that a try? Move around if you need to. The first thing that you want to do is to imagine the base of your skull. Well, we'll start at the opposite end. Imagine your pelvis. It's got a kind of a circular motion to it. Its design is circular. The base of your ribs is also circular. The other thing that I'll open your eyes for just a second. The other thing I'd like to say is that for folks who have a tendency to stand in a sway back position, as do I, you'll find that your sternum right here is thrust forward. When I was being taught this recently, about a year and a half ago, that the instructor just pushed on my sternum until it wasn't sticking out, till it was lined up across the front. So that may not be necessary for all of you. That was certainly true for me. This that I'm showing you right now comes from a system of body alignment called the Alexander technique. The Alexander technique is simply designed to help you find balance in your body so as to get rid of unnecessary rigidities, stiffnesses, and therefore associated pain and dysfunction. This kind of alignment should cause you to have fewer headaches, less tension in your neck, less tension in your shoulders, less tension in the lower part of your back. It'll also help your singing, which is what you're here for. But there are lots of byproducts about this. Okay, so now back to that. Can you take your hips, the circle of your hips, and take the circle at the base of your ribs and put them gravitationally, one right on top of the other. Watch what you have to do to get those two circles to line. It has a lot to do with the angle of your pelvis, no question about it. Then take the top of your body, that's the yoke of your shoulders, the scapula, the clavicles, collarbone, shoulder blades, and line that over the top of the circle at the base of your ribs. Now take your head and sit it right straight on top of the circle of your shoulders. Greg's off the microphone, but Greg, tell me, which of these approaches would you find to be the most useful and the quickest to understand?
The standing against the wall is actually a good starting point for me because I have a starting point. Whereas if I'm just standing, then the circles, it takes more, I guess, brain imagination.
It does, doesn't it? Okay, is that same for you, Gene? All right. She said that she felt herself tipping backwards a little bit more when she was using circle on circle on circle. And that's not unusual. Okay, so now, next thing I want you to do, we're going to move forward. This is singer's posture. I promise you that if you stay in this posture very long, you're going to be really sore later. Anytime you change something so fundamental as posture and try to hold on to it for any length of time, it takes certain sets of muscles and make them work harder, and other sets of muscles that used to work really hard are working less hard. The ones that are having to step up to their new task will weary quickly, and then you'll find yourself locked and stiff trying to hold on to something that's really artificial to you. So my advice to you is that you only adopt this posture briefly for periods of time. When you're practicing, when students at the university, I ask my students to practice in 20 to 30-minute bursts with rests in between, and then on through for several hours with those little resting periods in between. And while they're singing, they're in this position, and when they're at rest, they can be any old slobby way they want to. For most of you, the only time that you really sing is when you're calling a dance. That's too long of a period of time for you to hold that posture. The muscles will get really tired, and then it'll do you more harm than it'll do you good in the short run. So I would suggest to you that when you get up in the morning, you just set a little regimen. You say, from 7 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be in this posture. And since some of you don't get up till 8 o'clock in the morning, you're already excused from that one. But then you give it a rest, and then from 11 to 12 o'clock, or from 11 to 11:30, you go to this place, and then you go out of it. And then you come back from 2 to 2:30, and again from 5 to 5:30. You just periodically do that. See, I told you have to think about this. If you're going to make the changes, it isn't just one of those things that you automatically adopt. If you get used to this, it's all strange right at first, and you'll feel like everybody's watching you because you look really weird. And then you'll be dumbfounded that nobody pays that much attention to you anyway, and they won't think that you're weird even though you feel weird. After a while, you'll discover that in this new posture, it feels so much more comfortable. You don't have the body aches that you've had in the past, and you'll start to think, wow, maybe this is the way I ought to stand all of the time. Still don't go there. Just keep working your way along to it. Along about 6 months or 7 months from now, just doing that a little bit at a time, the muscles that are necessary to change your posture will have gained sufficient strength so that when you move over to that place, you'll be okay. Go ahead and have a seat. I've mentioned to you that this concept of concentric circles is a fairly new one to me that I picked up from another place not having direct relationship with singing. It has to do with kind of actions that dancers do and actors and so forth. And I was introduced to a workshop and had tried it on a couple of occasions. And so last Christmas, I'd sort of tinkered around with it, but I thought, it's time. I'm not teaching. I don't have a whole lot to keep me busy. I'm going to do it. And I said, from this 2-week period that I'm visiting my kids in California, I'm just going to do this new posture. About the third day, I thought, man, I don't know. I'm coming down with the flu. I got body aches so bad, and I feel headache. And I don't have a temperature. I don't have a cold. What's going on here? And I thought, oh, yeah, I just changed my posture. And so for about a week after that, I was sore just like you'd have the flu. And then after that, I got over it, and I was fine. But there is some discomfort that goes along with it. And I'd already been working on this a little bit at a time. Yes, Gene has a question.
You referred to the Anderson posture. What was it you said?
It's called Alexander, the Alexander technique. It's one of the systems of body alignment that helps eliminate unnecessary tensions in the body by helping the body become more efficient. And this that I just showed you this morning comes from that methodology. Okay, so if you can find singer's posture, your singing, the rest of the things that you do are going to be better. And I should be able to appreciably see a difference in the way that you walk next time I see you next year. Fat chance. No, you'll have done it. You'll have done it so well it'll be natural to you by then, and it won't look that much different. But it will feel different when you first start doing it. Okay, so now the next thing that I want to do is to talk to you about how you take the internal parts of your singing machine and make them work. And there are really three elements in your singing machine that need to be attended to. The first one is the vibrator. The vibrator is just a set of vocal folds set in a larynx inside your throat, right attached to your windpipe, right above your lungs. When you put air through it and set up the right conditions, it squawks. In its natural form, without all of the extra stuff that goes with it, when your vocal folds vibrate, it sounds like a really mature duck call, or like raspberries. It just says, or it doesn't sound all that attractive. It's just a buzzing sound when it comes out of your vocal folds as the vocal folds vibrate. Then those sounds that were made in the throat are introduced into the resonance tract, the vocal tract, about 7.5 inches of tubing and chambers that gradually turns it into a sound that we recognize as human. Really interesting how that works. The raw sound, the buzz tone, is not human at all. It doesn't sound human. But after it's gone through its a tuning process through the rest of the resonating tube, it comes out sounding like a human being instead of a dog or a cat or a cow or something like that. Although there are some folks that I know that sound a little bit like a dog or a cat or a cow. Pig. Okay, so the first thing is to know how to efficiently use your voice. And there is a basic principle of aerodynamics that I want to introduce you to. It's called the Bernoulli Effect. Any physicists here that want to describe what the Bernoulli Effect is? Good, then I can say whatever I want to, and nobody will know whether I'm saying it right. Okay, an engineer, you want to talk about the Bernoulli principle? Not very long. Yeah, these are the principles of fluid mechanics, aerodynamics as well. Non-solid movement. And it just simply says that air in motion, or liquid in motion, creates low pressure, suction. And that's what made the airplane fly that brought you here. You got on a plane. The plane has these wings. The wings are concave, concave above and flat below, so that as it slices through the wind, the molecules of air that pass above the wing have got to travel faster than the molecules that are below. The molecules are undisturbed below. The molecules above are quite disturbed. They have to move faster. As they move faster, they create low pressure. And if you get enough velocity going there, it's enough to lift a 747 off the ground and cause it to fly. It's really quite magical. I'm going to put my microphone down here for a second so that I can demonstrate the Bernoulli principle to you. I've got two pieces of paper in front of me. These are representative of your vocal folds. They don't look much like vocal folds, but it's the best I can do. So hang on just a second. I'll put this down. I'm going to blow through it. If you didn't know anything about the Bernoulli principle, you would, you hold the microphone, would you? If you didn't know anything about the Bernoulli principle, you would presume that as I blow between these pieces of paper, it would blow the paper apart, because the wind would blow them. That's what wind does. It blows things over, right? But just the opposite occurs. Now watch. I got these apart. As I blow between the pieces of paper, they're drawn together. And they're drawn together because of that principle of suction, the principle of low pressure that draws these pieces of paper together. Here we go again. Well, that's all well and good. But if you hit a certain velocity, watch what happens. Oh my goodness, they start to vibrate. They set up a cyclical action. That cyclical action draws them to closure briefly, and then the passing air parts them, and as they're parted, a new suction is created, and they're brought to open-close phase again and again and again. That same thing happens inside your throat. That makes your vocal folds vibrate. I want you to join with me in a little bit of an experiment. And then we're going to work on trying to find that place where your breath movement is at its optimum point, where your vocal folds will make the easiest and most complete sound possible. The first thing I want you to do is to put your lips close together, where they're touching. Then I want you to part them just ever so slightly so that they're almost closed but not touching each other. In that position, I want you to blow air through your lips and see what happens. Increase the velocity and watch what happens. Some of you have a hard time doing that. You get a bunch of tight lips. Now, as you hear me do it into the microphone, you can hear that it turns into a really nice raspberry. It just... But I got to have really flaccid lips to do this. This is a nice thing to do before you go and make out with somebody. It just sort of limbers up your lips a lot. Your lips are ever so much bigger than your vocal folds. You know, they're 2.5 inches across. They're thick. And it takes a certain velocity of wind to actually create enough suction to bring them closed. What makes them vibrate like that? The suction goes, they're drawn together, and for a split second, they're closed. But the ongoing pressure from behind needs an exit, so it blows them apart. And as it blows them apart, it sets up that negative pressure again, and they're sucked closed. So they get blown open and sucked closed. And that whole cyclical process is just something that's happening aerodynamically. There was some study done about 40 years ago, because there was up until that point a thought, do your vocal folds vibrate based upon aerodynamics, or do they vibrate because of muscle activity? You can try this if you want to. They took a set of vocal folds, and they closed them, and then they didn't put any air through them and said, okay, now talk. With no air moving, there's nothing to set the vibrator in motion. And so, you know, the whole concept of aerodynamics is a relatively new science, about 100 and some odd years old, a little bit more than that. And singing's been around for a long, long time. The study of singing's been around for 400 years. The careful cultivation of the human voice has been around for about 400 years. People have been singing as long as there have been people on the earth. But to really subject it to a systematic training is a fairly new thing, but it's even newer to the whole concept of aerodynamics. So the Bernoulli principle sort of revolutionized the whole way that singing is taught. I actually have in my library a book that was written in the 1950s where the Bernoulli principle was described. He said, it doesn't have anything to do with singing. Don't worry about it. It's maybe helps airplanes fly, but it's a false concept as it relates to singing. So the concept is a fairly new one in terms of the application of laws of physics to the process of singing. So now I'm going to try to help you get to the point where you can get that thing to happen. If you couldn't get your lips to buzz, go off in a corner and make them buzz. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to do that. But it's just a demonstration. Okay, now the next thing that I'd like to have you do, I need another volunteer, please. Come on. Don't be shy. Thank you. How you doing, Henry? Good. I'm going to ask Henry to do a couple of things now. The first thing that I'm going to ask Henry to do is to put his finger up in front of his mouth. I put it about 2 inches from your mouth or so. Imagine that on the tip of your finger is a child's pinwheel. I want you to blow on it to make it move slowly. Okay, now move it, move your breath and make it move kind of moderately fast. What did you have to do with your breath?
Just increase the volume.
There was an extra amount of effort that went into it. It's a question of volume or velocity, one or the other. You've got to make the air move faster to make the pinwheel move faster. So you put it under greater pressure and make the opening a little tighter, and all of a sudden the velocity or the pressure builds up. Agreed? Okay, now do that same thing and make it move fast. So he really increased the amount of energy. How did you do that? Imagine, try to figure out what your body does to increase airflow.
I felt the inside just kind of pulling in, pushing out.
Yeah. There's some activity right at the base of your ribs that's more vigorous than what's normal. Right? Would all of you please try that in your positions? Just put your finger up in front of your mouth, blow on it really casually, like you're just going to make the pinwheel move slowly. You hardly can tell what it is that you're doing to make the air blow. It's real subtle. But now make it move a little faster. And you can feel right down at the base of your ribs there's an activity that's very natural to all of us that intensifies the breath stream. Now make it move really fast. And you can feel that activity. Now remember that, because that's going to be important in just a second. Now, Henry, what I'd like to ask you to do is choose a note that's comfortable for you. Somewhere right about there? A little higher? That's not so comfortable, is it? Okay, go to the other one. Oh, all right, we're going to let him be in his safe zone right now. Now, I'm going to ask Henry to whisper that tone on a pitch. In order to do that, you had to relax something, didn't you? Can you want to describe it?
The space in the back of my mouth kind of closed up a little bit.
Got a little smaller.
Right.
Another thing that happened that he didn't identify because he's not used to dissecting it is that he didn't activate his vocal folds as much. They were, when we want to whisper to somebody, our vocal folds are more open and we let more breath pass through, so there's less constriction in the throat. Now that I mention it, can you sense that? In the throat, it's very loose and released, isn't it? All right. Now that nobody wants to sing that way, unless you're trying to make love to your dancers. I mean, it's a kind of a gentle, quiet voice, and nobody's going to listen to that. Why don't you do-si-do if you don't mind? Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. There is a sense of gentility that's really nice in terms of health, but isn't the sound that you really want. So if Henry can take that really loose whispering feeling in his throat and then combine that with that sense of increased breath dynamic, if the Bernoulli principle is true, he's eventually going to come to a point where his tone becomes very full, very commanding, but very relaxed. And that's the cool part. So here we go. So you're trying to maintain that sense of release in your throat that allowed you to whisper on pitch.
You want to
Start
before.
with that breath. No, start with that breath. Now take a new breath. This time, increase the velocity of your breath like you're making the pinwheel move a little bit fast. All of a sudden, it became a much fuller tone. It changed pitches, too. It shouldn't have done that. But it did change in its quality, moved from being breathy to being efficient. Go again. Only this time, make it move really fast. And what you know, now that didn't stay in the whispering position so good. So can you really work? You keep your throat in that whispering position, but it just increased the volume of breath. He's busy trying to figure out how to tune that thing, and all I want is a buzzy sound. That's one of the dilemmas. Now, I'm going to show you how to do this.
Okay.
And you're doing it really quite well, but you're trying to mix a whole bunch of things together. First, you just start off breathy. Here, as I increased my breath energy, the vocal folds got a little bit more efficient. There was still a little bit of white noise in there, but it was more sound than it was before. And that just had strictly to do with the amount, the volume, or the velocity of the breath coming through. The vocal folds were drawn a little bit more closed, but not complete. There's still a little leakage. So here we go again. Whoa, look at that. And here in my throat, that stays just in that whispery place. It's lazy. It's easy, but it does require breath and motion. Let's see if Henry can figure that one. Hold on to that whisper feeling. You can feel your throat want to constrict a little bit on that one. But that's enough habit. There it's coming. Now a little more velocity. One
one of the nice things that happens is that you move from a point of inefficiency, where it's breathy, got white noise in it, intermingled with tone, to a place where it's kind of clear. And then if you go one step farther, it isn't just clear, it's nice, rich and full. Before you've done any kind of resonance tuning, it's just a very healthy, buzzing tone, rich and full of harmonics coming right out of your larynx, right out of your throat. And that's a nice thing. Now, Henry has a tendency to do another kind of singing, and that is kind of a tight quality of sound. You remember when I asked him to make more volume, immediately it got an edginess quality to it. Instead of staying that kind of easy, casual, hear the quality change? What I did was stiffen up my vocal folds, and that's what most of y'all do. When you're below your threshold of singing, when you haven't hit that threshold where the air is really activating your vocal folds, you get one of two results. One of them is a breathiness. Nobody wants breathiness. Another one is a tightness, and that's where the vocal folds have habituated themselves to make do with the little amount of air going through them, and so they get a little bit stiff, and that puts an edge. They're a little more tense than they should, and that puts an edginess in the sound. And so if you can find this middle ground between where it's not tight, not tense, relaxed but rich and full, then you got the best of both worlds. Here we go again, Henry. You give it a try. Start from that breathy place. Now add a little more speed to it. Here it's starting to come to life. It's still not complete. And then hit that full, rich sound that anybody would want to listen to. It's nice and mellow. It's nice and easy. It's very natural. It's just strange, isn't it?
It's different.
Want to describe it?
It feels more resonant. It feels easier breathing as you're breathing out.
The interesting thing is that even though he's moving more breath, or it feels like he's using more breath, he could sing that way longer than he could sing his habitual way. And the reason is that when you hit that threshold, that is the most efficient that your breath will ever be. It's active enough to get your vocal folds to vibrate. It brings them to closure, and while they're closed, the breath isn't moving. But the vocal folds in their opening and closing cycle measure the amount of bursts of air that comes out of the throat, and you can sing that way as long as you can sing the other way. An efficient, breathy tone, you leak, and you run out of breath soon. The tight production requires more breath pressure to make it work, and so you run out of breath sooner. This is the nice, happy medium right in between. Thank you, Henry. Now all of you stand up and give that a try. Just raise your hands. How many of you here are natives of the United States? I guess maybe the better thing to say, anybody that's not a native of the United States. I'm trying to figure out what kind of folk songs to sing so that we can get this to work. Is it all right if we sing My Country 'Tis of Thee? Is that all right? Everybody know the words to that one, okay? Yes? All right, so first of all, put your finger up in front of your mouth, blow on it as if it were just a pinwheel and it's moving slow. Make it move kind of fast. Make it move really fast. Just feel what that feels like in your body, because that's what you're going to do here in a second. Now on this pitch right there, I want you to make it breathy, like you're whispering on a pitch. Now make the pinwheel move a little bit fast. Hold on to the sighing feeling in your throat. Now make the pinwheel move really fast. Okay, let's try My Country 'Tis of Thee. And your game is to see if you can keep your vocal folds relaxed. Every time you go up the pitch, you'll feel the habit in your body where it wants to stiffen down on you. You'll feel at the same time that it wants to stiffen down on you, you'll feel your breath tight and drive. Just don't give in to it. Just keep it flowing and keep your throat loose. Figure out how to do those tasks together. If you need the pinwheel to help you, keep your finger there as a little teaching tool. Ready? Go. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Now I'm going to pause for a second. In that low range, let's get some comments about what that feels like. By the way, though I can't hear you all, collectively it sounds like you're mostly there. I hear a little bit of kind of white noise. My country, my country, 'tis of thee. That's what the experiment is about. Let's get some comment. Let's see, this is Charlie. What does that feel like when you do that?
Well, it feels like I'm singing a lower key and a little uncomfortable.
In the sense of uncomfortable, does it hurt?
No, it takes concentration to do it.
It's unfamiliar.
Right.
That's the real issue. It's unfamiliar. And when I'm dealing with my voice students, often they'll say, oh, I don't like that. What is it about you? Well, it doesn't feel good. What do you mean by it doesn't feel good? Does it hurt? No, it doesn't hurt. It just doesn't feel good. You mean it doesn't feel like what you're used to? Yeah, that's it. It doesn't feel normal. Okay, so welcome to abnormal. Okay, let's get some more comments. Let's see, Hal.
I don't have any comments.
Ouch. Okay. Ron?
I have a hard time hearing myself sing. When I do that, I can hear myself.
That's actually a little scary. There's a little more energy in your tone, isn't there? Okay, Jean, from a woman's perspective.
Well, what I felt was movement in here.
She's touching her throat.
More than I'm used to.
There's something going on there that's drawing attention to itself that you're not accustomed to. Okay, here we go again. We're just staying in the low range. I stopped at that point because I wanted you to comment upon what it feels like. Does anybody, again, get a show of hands, how many feel a kind of a rich buzzing quality in the singing? Nobody? Everybody? Most of you? Some? A little more active than what you're used to? Okay, it's kind of buzzy right in the chest, down into the throat, and so forth. Yeah, you're moving much more air, more active than you were used to doing by quite a margin. And that raises the anxiety. If I'm using this much breath, am I going to run out sooner? The reality is that I haven't showed you how to do it, but for most of you, the answer would be, I feel like I'm going to run out of breath, but somehow I don't run out of breath. I'm surprised by that. There was a comment. Oh, okay, come back, Hal.
I'm missing the point here. Review again what we're supposed to be doing. Am I supposed to be trying to be breathy or trying not to be breathy? I don't understand what we're doing.
Thanks. That's a good clarification. The feelings that are associated with breathiness, the feelings in your throat that are associated with breathiness, I want you to hold on to. But as you move more breath through, the Bernoulli principle will gradually create a sufficient suction so that the vocal folds are drawn together themselves instead of being pressed together muscularly. And so if you're a person who is inclined to use a hypermuscular activity to get your vocal folds to be together and you sing this way with that kind of sound in your voice, this will feel very inefficient initially. It will feel out of control, and it will be kind of disquieting. Does that come in close to describing what you feel, Hal?
So the muscle, we're supposed to keep the throat muscles relaxed. That's the bottom line?
That is correct. But to not allow that relaxation to lead to inefficiency, you have to compensate somewhere, and that's with an increase of breath energy. That's correct. So here we go one more time. My country, 'tis of thee at the beginning. This time, use your pinwheel, and just let the pinwheel move slowly, and watch what happens to your tone. First phrase, go. My country, 'tis of thee. See how quick, now time out. You notice how quickly you ran out of breath. Now move the pinwheel faster, but still keep that sighing feeling in your throat. Next phrase. Sweet land of liberty. And all of a sudden, you don't run out of breath so fast. It's slightly more efficient. Now bring the pinwheel to fast. Of the I sing. Of the I sing. Now maintain that same sighing feeling as we go into a higher range. Go. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's bride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring. Okay, now let's get a little bit of comment from folks back here a little farther. Johnny, you want to talk a little bit?
I'm fascinated by it. Don't seem to be using any muscles up here at all. It's just watch your ear, just pushing right through. It's a totally different feeling.
It's a very nice feeling, except that it feels really out of control. Like you don't really know for sure if you're on the right pitch. There's a lot of disquiet that comes from this little subtle change that I'm asking. Let's see. Excuse me. Sue?
I've noticed a change, not so much now, but over the years as I have sung, that I can increase my length of breath and my pitch as well. And I guess it comes from practice.
It does indeed. It's just developing skills. Did this feel unusual to you?
Not a lot.
Good. Good for you. Anybody else got anything they want to add in? This is Bill.
It feels like less effort in many ways.
In your throat, I think that's a definite right answer. It feels less effortful in your throat. But let me come back and say, is it less effort down in your midsection?
It seems like more effort down there.
Exactly. That's right. In the torso, there's more activity. In the throat, there's less activity. Guess what? The big muscles are in your torso. The little muscles are in your throat. Give the little muscles a rest.
I noticed that as I increased the pressure, giving more volume going out, that as we finished, I felt very slightly hyperventilated, just as going through there.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot more air motion and less muscle activity. And that's actually a really, really good thing. Jean, did you say you had something you wanted to add?
I found that by the end of the phrase, my body was back in the old position, and I thought, oh, I got to straighten up. So
yeah, it is indeed what I was talking about earlier. You say, I'm on this new path, and pretty soon you're on the old path, and you're calling it by a new name and wondering why you're not getting any better results, and it's because you've come back over to the old path. That's right. Yes, Hal.
I've practiced this some before, and the problem that I've found that maybe you can help with is as I get near the top of my range, I lose it and go to falsetto a lot faster with my throat muscles relaxed. So could you at least comment on that? I mean, that seems to be a problem to me because all of a sudden my voice will crack, and obviously we don't want that.
That's right. You know, it reveals the inner schizophrenia in our souls. We don't want anybody to know that. That is actually what Hal is describing is particularly acute for men. Men we identify our voices in the heavier or the modal voice, and as we go higher, that has to transition itself, and it makes us feel less secure. We don't know that territory of our voice very well. That's actually coming in that's what the advanced class is going to be about, is how to negotiate that. And so, since all of us have a certain amount of anxiety about that, the tendency is to tighten down. The old strategy is to tighten down the muscles in the throat, increase the subglottic pressure, and just drive yourself up into the top. It's sort of like being out on a freeway in second gear. You can do it for a little while. You stay up there very long, and pretty soon your transmission's sitting on the highway. And you don't want that to happen with your voice either. But as I asked Hal to release control of his throat, that gives away the strategy that has allowed him to get into the top of his voice before. And at this point, he doesn't have a replacement strategy, and so it's not complete for Hal until he has an answer to sing this way up on into the top of his voice. Yeah. And so for now, you don't have all the answers that you're hoping for, at least on this element. Okay, everybody all right with that? You got some questions? The question is, how do you tell when you're on the threshold? Anybody got any comments to make? Let's see. Gary?
Mine is when the voice goes wrong.
You mean...
The note I'm aiming for is not the note I hit. I get close to it, right up next to it.
But not the right one. Well, actually, that's an intonation issue that I want to draw your attention away from, and toward the fact that when you hit the threshold of your breath is no longer, your voice is no longer airy and breathy, and it's no longer tight and stiff, tight and tense. And it's sort of released in your throat, and yet the sound is rich and full and efficient. There's no escaping breath. There's no edginess in the sound. That's when you know when you've arrived at that threshold level. Released in the throat, active in the breath flow, it creates a much different kind of sound. Here is the breathy sound, It's inefficient. There's not a sufficient amount of breath. There's not a sufficient amount of closure. Now I can tell that I'm under threshold. And so instead of increasing my breath, I tighten my throat muscles down, and then you get this kind of a sound. And you can hear it's got a little bit of tightness in it, a little bit of edge. It sounds a little bit like I'm ticked off. And that's one of the dilemmas with being a caller. If you use this kind of approach, your dancers will think that you're always dissatisfied with them, because we use that tension in our voices to describe, to use to communicate displeasure. So if you're singing this way to them, they're always going to be a little anxious because they think that you don't like them and they're not doing very well. And it's communicated not by the words you say, but by the tone that you create. On the other hand, if you get to that full sound and it's this nice, easy production, it engenders in them a sense of self-confidence. You're happy about them. This is the sound of tone that we make when we're happy, when life is good, and we have that pattern in our speech, and it carries over into our singing. Okay, I'll go ahead and have a seat and relax for a second. Hold on a second. Gary, got a question? Yeah, you want to try this again? Yes, you may. Sure. Here we go. You're actually trying to figure out for your own selves what this feels like, because you're going to be doing an awful lot of self-monitoring. Here we go. Did it help when I asked you to start breathy and gradually get it more efficient, or do you want to just go straight to it? You can feel, that's right, you actually can feel when you hit that threshold level, all of a sudden your voice kind of kicks into full volume, and you're not doing anything to make it happen, or so it seems. So here we are. Was that too high-pitched before? About the same? Okay, here we are, right about the same place. My country, go. My country. Go ahead. That was actually much better than even the time before. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Go ahead and have a seat, please. Yes, hang on just a second. Your name is?
From St. Pete, Florida. My partner has always said, you know, when you're up there on stage, you need to lower your voice, And when I get on stage, I'm nervous, and therefore my voice is accelerated. I'm always running out of breath. When I am here this morning, I started, as you indicated, and I found that I had more breath. And as we were singing, I all of a sudden tensed up, and my voice all of a sudden shifted a little higher, very recognizable. And then when I recovered, I came back down to the level where my voice, to me, seems a little fuller.
What Ted just identified is a challenge that some of the rest of you may also have, and that is that you have one behavior when you're at ease and another kind of behavior when you're nervous. And when you get nervous, the things that you practiced when you were relaxed kind of go out the window. The reality is that if you persist at that change, the time will come when the change will become the norm. But during that period of time, Ted and other folks like you will find yourself attempting to do the new and spazzing out and doing the old. You find yourself in a transitional place. So my advice to you is that you don't go to your next dance and say, I'm going to apply these techniques. That you actually spend conscientious time in the privacy of your own home practicing things, singing folk songs, singing hymns, singing songs that are familiar to you. Your square dance calls, but concentrating on the process of how you do it, not upon the choreography of it. And do it and do it and do it until you can feel safe and confident. At that point, then you take it out into public, and people will say, Ted, what happened? Did you go through puberty? Your voice is different. And you'll say, no, it's always been that way. It's just no big deal. Yes, hang on.
I was noticing that as I was trying to sing, I've got a little bit of an allergy, and I'm having to pass a lot more air to get over that breathy sound. And I was wondering if there's something you could suggest that you could help to get over that. And secondly, does it come across that way to other people?
There are two questions there. Let me answer the second one first. No. The second one is it does not come across that way to other people. When you hit that point of threshold, your voice just sounds healthy and efficient. Now, what was the first question again? Oh, yes, thank you. You don't, as much as you want, you don't want, as much as you'd like to take something to clear the phlegm up out of your throat, you're probably wiser not to, unless it becomes really overwhelming. It is possible to take an antihistamine, over-the-counter antihistamine. Most of the antihistamines have a little bit of decongestant in them. Because the antihistamine has a great tendency to dry your voice out. It dries out your sinuses, but it dries out all of the mucosal membranes in your larynx. Then instead of, if you don't have any moisture down in your throat, it's a little bit like running a car without any oil. The vocal folds collide, the moisture becomes the lubricant, the lubricant's gone, the flesh on the cords bump against each other, and it's not so good. So too much of an antihistamine isn't a really good idea. The reality is that the more congested, the more tightly you sing, the more your allergies are going to bug you. The more released you are in your throat, the less the allergies will be apparent to other people. So when you hit that threshold from a relaxed place, they won't know it as much if you have a tendency. I've been blabbing along here. How are we doing on time? Oh, geez, so I better step on it.
As long as you're on that subject, is there anything that you would not recommend before you perform or before you sing, as far as drinking or eating or imbibing of any sort?
Sex is a lot of fun. Who says? It sort of reduces the tension level and makes you feel mellow. Okay, we'll move on. It was a simple question that I didn't have to give that answer to. I apologize. In terms of what you drink, stimulants probably aren't so good for you. You're probably going to be sufficiently stimulated, nervous, and so if you drink caffeinated drinks or coffee, that's just going to exacerbate that tendency. In terms of hot and cold, it really doesn't matter very much. It really doesn't, because the liquids that you take in never do touch your vocal folds. You all know what it feels like when you swallow something down the wrong pipe. Nobody wants hot coffee on their vocal folds. Nobody wants cold soda on their vocal folds. It goes down your esophagus to your stomach. It doesn't go down the trachea to your vocal folds. So that's a bit of an old wives' tale that says, I got to take a hot drink to warm my voice up. You don't want, your voice is already at 98.6 degrees, thank you very much. It doesn't want to be at 202 degrees. It doesn't want to be at 180 degrees where you're, nor does it, do you want it at 65 degrees. It just is what it is. The liquid that you take in really isn't going to do you any good right now. The liquid that you drank at 5 or 6 hours ago, that's what's going to make a difference to your vocal folds right now. So you feel a little dry in your mouth, go ahead and take some liquid in your mouth, but it's not going to affect your vocal folds. It really won't. Some people have allergies to milk products, and that produces an excessive amount of mucus in their mouths. And so the great risk there is that the mucus, as you go to inhale, gets sucked down the wrong tube, and right in the middle of your singing, you have to stop and cough. So if you're lactose intolerant, then you don't want to drink milk products before you go to call. But quite simply, there are an awfully lot of old wives' tales associated with this that you don't really need to pay attention to very much. Don't drink milk products if they affect you badly. Don't worry about hot and cold because it doesn't touch your vocal folds. I got to go trucking right along here because I'm only about a quarter of the way done. Sorry about that. We're having a good time, and I don't want to hurry. I want to give you all a chance to experiment enough so that you feel comfortable. Now the next thing is, how do you make your breath last for the length of time that you want it to last? Even with this heightened airflow, you're more efficient, but still it may cause you some trouble. Most calling tips, most phrases in a singing call only last from somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 seconds. They don't require any special skill. Every human being should be able to make a phrase last about 6 seconds. But anything still, it may cause you some trouble. Most calling tips, most phrases in a singing call only last from somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 seconds. They don't require any special skill. Every human being should be able to make a phrase last about 6 seconds. But anything longer than 6 seconds, you have to do some strategy. You have to use your breath in a more efficient way than you're accustomed to doing it. And sometimes you'll want a style where instead of breathing at the end of every phrase, you carry a phrase over. And now all of a sudden you've got an 8 or a 10-second phrase that if you don't know how to manage your breath, you're going to be in trouble. And I'd like to show you how to do that. The first thing that I want you to do is to discover your diaphragm. Would you pretend that you have a martini straw? Breathe in through that martini straw vigorously. You all should feel a very vigorous activity right at the base of your ribs. That's the action of your diaphragm. The diaphragm is an inverted bowl-shaped muscle that sits right at the base of your ribs. When it flexes, it goes downward. When it goes downward vigorously, you can feel its action. That's why I put the inhalation under a greater stress than normal, to draw attention to the muscle as it worked too hard. Okay? Now that position that you just went into is the position that you should sing in all through the whole of the phrase. One of the reasons why people run out of breath is not that there isn't breath left in their lungs, but they can't get access to it. And as the diaphragm flexes downward, your lungs are full. As soon as the diaphragm goes flaccid and no longer works, then there's no control of the exit of breath, and it just rushes out in a big rush. So the first notes in the phrase sound really nice, and the ending notes sound like you're running on fumes. So maintaining that low diaphragmatic position is important. Do that little martini straw one more time. Now, sitting where you are, hold on. You can feel the stretch in your ribs. Keep that stretch as you sing the first phrase of My Country 'Tis of Thee. I've talked too much. Now take a new breath. As soon as you take that stretch breath, suspend it and sing My Country. My country. Keep the stretch in your ribs. Stretch. Stop. Now, take My Country 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty, and don't breathe between them. Take that stretching breath. Suspend it. Go. My country, 'tis stretch, 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 sweet land of liberty. Some of you are successful getting there and some of you are not. But the idea is that as you started to run out of breath, you could feel a collapse. The collapse is the result of your diaphragm not being active. It flexes, and then it goes flaccid. That's the normal thing that most people do. Singers learn how to maintain that low position all the way through, so that if you manage it properly, my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. I don't know how many seconds that was, but it was 3 phrases strung together. And that was made possible because I insisted that my body not do that collapse. Here's how you can learn how to do it. I didn't bring it with me. Does anybody have a hardback book? When you go back up, the Gideon Bible in your room will make a wonderful little tool to use. You take that thing, you put it right here in your solar plexus and lean against the wall. Here's a hard spine book. Come on up, Gary. Come over here against the wall. Okay, no, you're come on over here. I'm going to get Gary to face the wall. Face the wall. Greg, sorry. Face the wall. Now put this book right here in the solar plexus and lean against the wall. Okay, now lean in. Now, I want you to push yourself away from the wall. The tool that he used to do that is a flexing diaphragm. And the way you test that is that the next time you push yourself away, inhale. No, go ahead and keep doing it. And you'll notice it's very natural. As he inhales, his diaphragm flexes, and as his diaphragm flexes, it flattens and it spreads out, and that pushes him away from the wall. Now watch what happens. I'm going to get you to take that thing, take that breath, and push yourself away from the wall. Then I want you to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. Watch how he keep away. That's excellent. Thank you. It's really... Thanks, Greg. The reason that was possible for Greg is because he managed to figure out a way to keep his diaphragm engaged through the whole singing process. If you want to create an extended phrase, you have to keep your diaphragm in that low position. Somewhere, the air's got to come out, though. Something's got to happen to get the air in motion. And that is caused by the abdominal girdle of muscles, a three-ply set of muscles that gird the abdomen. You can find it by blowing hard on the back of your hand like this. That's correct. And as you do it, you'll feel some vigorous contraction in the abdominal girdle. That is the natural thing that should happen. So as Greg started to sing, initially he had enough breath in his lungs to carry him through 4 or 5 seconds, no problem at all. But starting at about the 5th or the 6th second, the pressure in his lungs was the same as the pressure in the world at large. And therefore there was no motivation for the breath to keep going if he didn't do something to cause that to happen. You didn't happen to notice what your body did you, Greg? Toward the end? He was just so intent on keeping his diaphragm flexed that he didn't see what the rest of it was that was going on. But at that point, when Greg said, I've run out of fresh breath, and I got to keep myself out away from the wall, something had to happen there. And that was where that lower abdominal girdle started to tuck in. Because the diaphragm is constructed in a very interesting way. It looks a little bit like a circular trampoline, where it's, you know how the springs tie it all together. Consider those the muscle fibers of your diaphragm. And in the center, it's just a ligamental bed. A ligament is nothing but stretchy fabric. It's like a rubber band. And so as the abdominal girdle gradually starts to contract, it takes your stomach and your intestines and so forth and puts it under pressure, upward pressure. And that upward pressure hits the center bed of the diaphragm and bows it up into the center. So it raises in the center, keeping pressure on the underside of the lungs to keep the pressure high in your lungs. Now that's made possible because the diaphragm itself is in that low position, stretched taut, so that the center bed can lift up. If the outer springs give way and it collapses, then as the abdomic pressure grows, it doesn't affect the inner center bed of the diaphragm because it's flaccid. There's nothing to hold it firm so that the center bed can rise. That's probably more information than you wanted to have, but that's the reason why this sense of staying down and out is so essential. So, would you all stand up for a second? So you take yourself a stretching breath. My country 'tis of thee. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Now take a breath. Of thee I sing. Now along the way, while you're doing this, you start getting physically active here. It's so easy for these throat muscles to go back into their gripping place. So be reminded that you're still staying in that released place. Most of you have used your vocal folds not just simply as vibrators, but as controllers of the exit of air. They're stiffer than they need to be because this methodology, this means of managing your breath, hasn't been part of your vocabulary. So now you just tighten up your throat. You start running out of breath. What do? You just start squeezing it out like this. The right answer is to stay here and leave these passives. So, what is it? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Stretch. Take a stretch in your ribs. Go. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Go ahead and have a seat. Come on up for just a second. Gordon's shaking his head. No. He's having a really good time. That's what he meant to say. It's sort of like what you say when you go to camp and as a kid. I'm having a really good time. Okay, so the first thing that you want to try to do is to get that breath to stretch out. Can you take a breath that stretches your ribs? Now you notice that when he did that, his shoulders went up. Can I get you to breathe not there, but breathe here? There's a diaphragm. You're going to want to borrow Greg's book or get a Gideon's Bible. And yeah, and can you make my finger move outward? And I don't mean to push so hard. Okay, now, without breathing, just push my hand out. That's your diaphragm. Do it again. Push it out. Now, breathe in while you're doing that. He's got two different strategies. Use your diaphragm to breathe with. There you go. Okay, now that's not normal for you at all, is it?
No, not at all.
Tough. Get over it.
Thanks.
Now, take your breath. Now sing My Country 'Tis.
My country 'tis of thee, sweet land. Help! Help! I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now you're actually doing all right. Try it again.
My country.
You're already broken. Make my hands.
My country.
Threshold.
'Tis.
So there's three tasks that he's trying to do all at the same time. That's not an easy thing. That's the reason I started with the isolations.
My country 'tis of thee.
Stop. Take a stretch. Go.
Sweet land of liberty.
Good. You've got some challenges, don't you? Yeah. Actually, the challenge is simply that in the very first place, you're not used to using air very much. So as I'm trying to get you to do that, you've got too many tasks going simultaneously. Maybe I could spend some time apart. Okay, I know time's, if it's not gone, it's pretty near gone. 2 minutes. Okay. I didn't get to the resonance, the introduction, so let me just quickly go through that, and then I'm going to give you some warm-up exercises that you'll be interested in doing. Matter of fact, I think I'll go right straight to the warm-up exercises. Just like any good athlete, there are three kinds of stretches that you want to do. They're all stretches. The first one is the stretch of your posture. When you get in that place, you'll feel a stretch in your spine, a straightening of the spine, less sway backness. You get a stretch in your neck. There'll be a sense of stretching out. Go into that once or twice. Find it again. The next stretch is that stretch around your ribs where you take that low diaphragmatic breath. You can do it with a martini straw. You can block one nostril. Anything that will cause the inhalation to have to be a little bit more vigorous than it would otherwise be helps you find that stretching place. That's the second stretch. The third stretch is the stretch that goes on in your vocal folds. And it just simply is a little fricative W. And what I mean by that, it's a small W so tight that it starts to vibrate. Rather than and you put some positive pressure. I'm not going to explain what that means, but you just go. I have a prize for all of you. Would each one of you take this? Each one take one and pass it around. This is a straw. It's a little half straw. Okay? And just take one. What you do with this straw is you put it in your lips. Let me get one. And you just simply blow on the straw while you're singing. And as you're doing that, try to maintain that stretch in your ribs, because you'll find habitually, especially you men, that when you hit the halfway point in your scale, you'll go from that stretching place to a contracting, squeezing place. Try to get over that. Try it. Just put the straw on your lips. And all that does is stretch the inside edges of your vocal folds. It's just stretching. That's all it is. There are three excellent ways to warm up. So if there are those occasions when you can't really warm up any place, don't go onto the podium to call a dance until you've done that little stretch of your posture. Another one, stretch, is the rag doll, where you just sort of bend over, let your spine stretch out, pull yourself back up into that posture that you were in. Take a stretching breath. But do it from the point of view of your stretched ribs. Try it. First, stand up. Stretch over toward your toes. Touch them if you can, but stretch over. And as you come back up, do so vertebrae by vertebrae, rolling into an upright position instead of an all stiff position. Find yourself in that position. Take a stretching breath. Where it causes your ribs to stretch, do the glide with the straw on your lips. There is something quite magical about having a blocked opening, an occluded opening, a really small opening. It puts positive pressure behind in the vocal tract. It makes the vocal folds vibrate in a more passive way, and you can see what this does. I'm going to take the straw out. Watch. That's a big noise. And it'll put you in a place where you've got a sufficient amount of breath moving so that you can hit that threshold. It moves a lot of breath. If you don't have your straw with you, just purse your lips into a small W. This actually works really effectively. How many of you have trouble hitting low notes? Anybody? Any of you having trouble? This works really well in the reverse order. And there's a very nice sound that I'm going to get onto with the intermediate group later today that has to do with something called the Freitone. That's a German word for a free tone. And it's those of you that have been calling for a little while and your voice gets tired, just go off in a corner somewhere in your break and do that allows that position requires a great deal of release of musculature, and people whose voices are tight have a really hard time doing that. So if you can go so you take that Freitone feeling and blend it over into an actual sung note, and as you go through it, it'll all of a sudden make your vocal folds more efficient in their vibration pattern. So, and then you get a chance to kind of find your way all the way through your whole range again. Well, go ahead and have a seat. I've blabbed on longer. I'll have to. One of the problems with adding new things every year is that I don't know what to cut out and I don't finish. I apologize for that. Yes, question, comments? Hold.
If the participants in this really enjoy this, because I've kind of been through this a couple times, it would be great if part 1 was 2 sessions so that we could have more time to work with this wonderful person. So please include that on your critique sheet.
So you're saying that the basics should be 2 sessions? You know, I've got about enough so that I could do another session just on I slow down this last part. And the thing that we didn't get to touch on is how to do things with the resonance tube. And we'll just have to not do that this time. I'm sorry about that, but we'll catch up on it next time around. Here's a question.
Are you recommending for us first-time participants in this not to attend the second session? To wait until next year?
No, you're welcome to attend, but in terms of the certification process, this will be what you'll get for this time. Then you need to go work on these things, because in order to get the benefit of what's on the intermediate level, this has to be kind of functional for you. And particularly in the last part of this, I just sort of sped up because I dallied too long on the posture stuff.
One of the things that was advertised for this session was extending your range, which was my principal interest, and we didn't get there. Will we get there on part 2, or where is that?
The part 3 is where range extension. I noticed that they wrote it that way, but the issues that are here are fundamental skills. Intermediate has to do with changing dynamics primarily, and part 3 has to do with extending range. That is correct. I got here this morning, got my packet, and went, oh gosh, that isn't what we're supposed to be doing. So there is a breakdown in communication there between the two of us, and we'll try to correct that next time around. I apologize that we didn't get as far as we wanted, as I'd hoped. I hope you had a good time. I'll see y'all later.